Hey guys, I am so excited for today's video. We are going to be asking Bobby some questions about webmail. He has tried it for a whole week
Full disclosure.
exclusively.
Full disclosure. It was more than a week.
Oh, wow. Even
Yeah.
better. Like I'm giddy, truly.
And I'll wait to the end to say whether or not I decided to stay on it.
So you have a true opinion on if you're going to continue using it or not.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All
I think
right.
it might be insightful for our users.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in. So first, we're going to be talking about the pros that he found out about webmail.
Yeah. So first up, I want to talk about how using the webmail, you have a faster transition between computers. What do I mean by that is, now this is a little bit more from an admin person, as an IT person. It's really great that when you go to hop from another machine to another machine, it's just easier because if your users are trained to go into the right website, they just log in with their email address and password and they're done. Versus if they're just using a full-fledged Outlook desktop, they've got to get used to knowing that process of creating a new Outlook profile, which is not always very intuitive. So it just helps people become much more mobile using the web browser. Next, we want to talk about how I feel that the calendar synchronization between the mobile app and the online browser is just better.
Yeah.
What I've noticed is it's not uncommon for like the calendars that I have set up and how I have them configured and kind of designed in the Outlook desktop app. They don't always reflect that in the web app.
Which is so interesting.
Yeah. And well, what I noticed is as we started talking about that, I'm like confused why you weren't expecting that behavior. And then once I started using the web app, then I understood why you were being confused. So like if you go to create specific calendars, set different calendars in different ways, they stay in perfect harmony between the phone app and your web.
Right.
But not always the case in the full desktop app. And I won't go into all the reasons why that is and how you can get around that. That's something that we could talk about completely differently. But just suffice it to say, they stay in a lot better harmony. And that's just really the point I'm wanting to make.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd like to have an honorable mention for Dominique Hussein. Hopefully I said your name correctly, but he shook both me and Kaylee to the core with his suggestion about switching the view to the board view. So
yeah, I just had a meltdown. You didn't see it off camera, but I swear I had one.
I did it.
Board. That's new.
Yes. Where are you seeing that? I'm not seeing it on this one.
Oh my God. That's amazing. They added tasks.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like, oh, wow.
Yeah, we've been talking about having some options or better options for task management as well as just inside calendar. And boy, did they deliver with this new view option inside there. So basically in the calendar view inside your webmail, where you would normally just pick whether you wanted to go day, week, or month view, there's now an option called board view, which when you go to board, it's kind of like what it's saying. It's almost like a game board where you could shrink or change or adjust your calendar, how you want your calendars, add task lists. So it really gives you a very powerful configuration option, and you don't have that anywhere in Outlook. So this is a pretty big deal for some users. And so thank you so much for that shout out. You really rocked us with that one. And that's the beauty of YouTube and the collaboration between everybody. So thank you for that mention. We are loving it and we're using it now. So thanks.
Thank you.
So another big issue that we see, we get tickets all the time for this, is when you go to open up the full version of Outlook, especially for a user that has come back from vacation.
Oh, yeah.
What happens is Outlook says, hey, I haven't checked the mail server in a week. Let me go out and pull down all of the latest, greatest mail. So it starts pulling all this mail down, and it can take sometimes, depending on the volume of mail that you have, a long time. Now, a solution for that is some people just turn what's called caching off on your Outlook. The problem is you pay a penalty, a pretty heavy penalty if you turn caching off on your Outlook, because as you move between email messages, what's happening is your Outlook client is going to the web and looking at it. So you have about maybe a second to sometimes as long as a 2 or 3 second lag before you get to see the email. Whereas if you have caching, it's almost instant. So as you're just tabbing through it, you're seeing the mail instantly. Well, with the web client, you don't have that problem. You log in, you see it right then, and there's
Right.
no wait time. Also, there's no time for searching, right? So if you go to search stuff, if you have a full desktop app and you go to do searching, you're going to have to wait a little bit in the first thing in the morning to make sure that your machine has enough time to properly index all the mail that it just had so you would have an accurate search.
And I mean, 1 to 3 seconds, when you say that at first, it doesn't sound like that long of a time. But if it's taking that long for every single one of your emails to open, I mean, that will
Yeah.
slowly start to add up over time.
I'm going to combine these next two into kind of one item. So this one is the fact that you have easier access to all the Office products from anywhere. And the second
Yeah.
one is that licensing is easier and possibly cheaper for you based on your configuration and settings. So with 365, this kind of goes into the admin section, maybe not really more of a user section, but the price for the different licenses that Microsoft 365 offers can vary pretty much, pretty dramatically. Just the basic web client, which gives you the web access like we have, that's like $8, depending on what license you have. Whereas if you go with the full desktop app, it can be as much as $20 or even $32 a user. So we're talking some significant savings if you decide to go web client only.
Right.
Now, all of your apps are still in the web client and you go to open them. And to be honest with you, I've started really playing and using the web apps versus the desktop apps to see how I like them. And
Yeah.
I've been pretty impressed with how well they work as well. It's not the same, and there's some learning curve, and maybe we might do a video on that. But it is pretty significant in the fact that you can save some considerable money not using the full desktop apps and your licensing costs, as well as you have, a lot of those features that we were talking about. And then you have all of the applications at your fingertip as soon as you log into the web browser. So I think that is something that is sometimes underrated, but can be quite significant when it comes to the financial incentive on why you might want to think about that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
One I noticed, which I thought was very interesting, and it surprised me, is that I've noticed that the spelling offerings are more accurate. Does that surprise you, Kaylee?
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, so the word dictionary that comes with it isn't plugged in, obviously, to the cloud, and it's not able to real time get accurate readings. So
right.
In my opinion, I think that's the reason why its spell checking is just more accurate. The suggestions that I find it providing to you seem to be more in line.
So, I mean, when you say that, it does make sense, but I never thought about it in that way. And maybe it's because I was doing it right all along, but I'm not pointing that out. I'm not trying to point that out, but
there's some cons coming, so just chill. One of the things that I have noticed as well is it feels like with the web client, there's a better directional alignment and support for SharePoint and OneDrive. For example, it just seems to detect misconfigurations easier on the web client if I'm trying to attach files. And what I mean by that is, say that I'm attaching a file to a user externally or internally inside the organization. The web client has its own checking features. Now, the Outlook does have that, the full desktop version, but I just find that it seems to be more accurate in notifying me that if I'm sending a OneDrive or a SharePoint link to a user externally, that if I don't have permissions right, that they will fail to access it. In other words, they'll have a problem. It notifies me, which is a pretty cool feature.
That is, yeah, that's awesome.
The last thing on this list that I do find is it's nice that I don't have to worry about updating my version of Office.
So
I can't understate this enough. Pushing new versions of updates as an admin is a pain. Making sure that not only are you going from the major versions of, like, say, Office 2016 to 2019, but also when you start thinking about the internal patching and updates for those apps respectively. If you're using the web client, it's it's non-issue.
Yeah.
So that is a really powerful perk that a lot of people undersell. But as an admin, I mean, it's like awesome.
Yeah.
So let's switch to the cons. Are you ready? Are you ready for that?
I guess I'm ready.
Okay. There aren't as many. So that probably surprises you. I'm sure if I wanted to be more nitpicky, I could find more. But one of the things that I do say is that's a con is that how some of the menus and where things are placed, they're just different. So there is, I wouldn't necessarily say a steep learning curve, but there is a significant learning curve for users that may be more set in their ways that are older. If you're used to more of a web browser-based mail system like Google, then the transition will be very seamless for you.
Right,
So
right.
really, you have to really start thinking about where you're coming from and where you're going to determine how well. Now, is it worth the effort to learn that transition? I feel it truly is. Spoiler alert, in my opinion, I feel like the web client, after I've been immersed in it for several weeks now, that I just feel like it's a better solution. There's obviously cons to it, which there are a few more that I'm going to talk about, but I do feel like ultimately it is the right choice because it is more forward thinking and there's a lot of benefits you get from it.
Welcome. Welcome
Well,
to our
thank
side.
you. One of the things that I did find pretty challenging, and I hope that maybe users that are watching might give me some suggestions on how to accomplish this, is I come from using the desktop app. And so when I'm trying to find my email, if I just hit Alt Tab or if I just look at my taskbar, it's very easy for me to know where my mail is at. But if you're using it in a web browser and you have maybe 20 tabs open on various different browsers, it can be a little challenging trying to find out which one of those has your email on it. So that's where having a little bit more discipline as far as in perhaps maybe you only check your mail on a specific browser type, or having one specific browser window open that only contains your mail, and it makes it much faster and easier to find if you do that. That was the solution that I went in, but it would be great if there was some more intuitive suggestions or options for you able to do that. Microsoft just announced today that Windows 11 is coming out, and I'm sure they'll probably have better integration with the webmail, and they may have some additional solutions that will make this even easier.
Yeah.
The next thing that I thought was kind of interesting or annoying for me is that in order for me to do spell check on anything that I'm writing, I must left click.
No, you hate that left click, don't you?
Well, I've always grown up in the right click spell check option. I wasn't even aware in the full-fledged version of Word that left click even presented you with spelling check options. Because back in the old days, that wasn't an option. I've just always used the right click option to be able to see it. Well, that's not the case. And I was like, that's not how it is in Word. I went to Word, and sure enough, you can left click and it's only spell options there. So it's just, I'm a creature of habit of going from the old days that you had spell check options while you right clicked.
Yeah.
And that's just not the case in the web version. There is no right click option that has any spelling options. And so that was just a weird quirk that I noted. I would doubt many people would probably see that, but for me, it just kind of threw me for a loop for a little bit.
Yeah.
The last thing I think is probably a big one for most users, and that is notifications. The notifications can be a little tricky to get set up in order for them to show up, especially when you start talking about having maybe 15 or 20 or even 30 tabs open between various different browser windows. Making sure that you're getting those notification pop-ups as you're receiving emails is pretty important. So there's two different areas that you need to do this. First off, you need to go into your web client in your Outlook web access and tell it, I want to send notifications to my screen. So there's an option in there which we'll show you on the screen for where you can do that at. But also inside the web browser itself, you need to turn on notifications for that. So you really have to do it in two places. For example, in Edge, how you set that up to allow notifications is different than you would do it for Chrome. So you actually have to do it in two locations if you want to make sure that those are showing up. Now, for some users, you may be lucky and it just works flawlessly. For other users, their security settings or other things may inhibit that from happening. So if you do a Google search, it's a slew of people are complaining about this issue, and usually just adjusting those two things addresses it. For example, in my situation, I noticed that it wasn't happening for me on Edge, which is what I use my web browser for when I'm doing my email. And it can't. And when I went to go in the notifications inside Edge, it actually had it specifically blocked. I had to go in there and remove that out and then add it and whitelist it as being allowed to do notifications. So in hand with that con that I have about notifications, I would prefer like a full screen notification that comes up. Now that'd be pretty hard to do with a web browser, but Microsoft does write the operating system, and they do have the ability to kind of game the system since they wrote the operating system, the browser, and the application at the same time.
Right.
So perhaps if they don't do something from a monopoly perspective, it would be really great to have that pop up like you have in the full-fledged desktop, to where it would just come straight to the foreground of the screen to say, hey, look, stupid, you've got an appointment you need to be at.
So in the end, what are your final thoughts about webmail?
So in my final thoughts, I am in fact going to switch to Webmail permanently.
Amazing. Wow.
So
That's
I've
awesome.
decided to kind of to go that direction. I feel like it's just a better solution that has more options for me. There are some cons, obviously, that I listed that I do wish I had better notification options. And I feel like Windows 11 is probably going to give us some better capabilities for that, hopefully, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah. Well, I'm super excited to get your fresh look on Webmail and getting to see your opinion trying it out for over a week. And I hope that you guys watching this can take a lot from this. But also, we would love to hear your thoughts about maybe something that we didn't mention that you love about it, or even a con that you don't like about it that we didn't mention. We'd love to hear your comments and comment back to you guys of all of your ideas and thoughts about Webmail. So we hope you guys enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for a more in-depth version on Webmail soon. But yeah, we hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.